Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the X-Men Legacy Legion Omnibus, so without further ado, let's take a look at this book. Okay, here is the cover of the book with some awesome collage style artwork of Legion. I really like this. And here is the spine of the book. It says X-Men Legacy Legion, and then we've got a little icon of Legion there. And here is the back of the book featuring some awesome artwork, and his name is Legion and he is many. Okay, so first let's go over the contents of this book, what actual issues it collects. It is quite simple. It's X-Men Legacy issue 1 through 24. That is it. Alright, let's talk content. Let's talk Legion, Charles Xavier's son, David Haller. And I'm going to preface this by saying if you are a Legion fan, then this is probably, from what I've read so far, of any Legion in comics, like the definitive Legion run to pick up. I thought it was fantastic, and I'll say, Legion is not even a character that I care too much about, but I thought it was just so compelling, this story. I thought it was so well written by Simon Spurrier. It gives you a lot to think about, and there's a lot of great messages that can be extrapolated from it. And then all of that aside, it also has a great ensemble cast here too. Specifically, I want to highlight Blindfold in this, who is another character that I knew about. I'd seen her in the Krakoa era. I've seen her pop up here and there, but didn't care too much about. I will say, leaving this, I think I care much more about her than I do even Legion. She was just a phenomenal character in this as well, equally captivating, really tragic backstory herself, and a huge compassionate heart, and I love to see that in a character. And I love to see that in a character who also stands their ground, which she does quite often in this against Legion. But ultimately, this is kind of the quintessential love story of Legion and Blindfold too, so it's really sweet and endearing, and it gets you buckled in for the stakes of this story. I do think I'm getting a bit ahead of myself though here, so let's go back and sort of talk about what X-Men Legacy is, and how friendly this is for a new reader to X-Men, or if you're just, semi into X-Men, but really want to dive into Legion as a character. So yeah, this is a deep dive into Legion's head, both metaphorically and quite literally too in the story. If you're unfamiliar with Legion, like I said, he is David Haller, that is Charles Xavier's son, and he is an Omega level mutant who has access to basically a wide array of powers. He can do telekinesis, time manipulation, pyrokinesis, just matter manipulation. Basically, if you can think of it, he can probably do it. Although the caveat to all that is that his powers are tied to different personalities that live inside of his mind, and there is like hundreds of them in there that are sort of constantly fighting for control. In many stories, Legion has been an adversary to the X-Men because of this, because he's unable to get those personalities under control, and sometimes more nefarious personalities will rise up and take control. And of course, as David battles with his own psyche, he also battles with daddy issues, being the son of Charles Xavier, the pivotal X-Men who started it all, a champion of mutant rights. Those are some big shoes to fill, and frankly, Charles hasn't always been super present in Legion's life. He was, busy building his X-Men team, fighting for the mutant dream, while his son was dealing with massive trauma and multiple personalities. And this book certainly, at its core, explores a lot of that broken relationship and how David is sort of remedying it in his head. And where this story takes place in sort of the larger X-Men mythos is this comes after Avengers vs. X-Men, because Cyclops, the Phoenix Force imbued Cyclops, I should say, has already killed Charles Xavier. So this is Legion living in the world without his father. He's angry, he's lost, he's got his issues with Charles Xavier and his X-Men and the way that they fight for the mutant dream. Legion's big thing is, hey, this is a paramilitary group of children that my father has weaponized to go try and fight for his mutant dream. And also he makes a point to state that he really dislikes the way that the X-Men are largely reactive to problems and not proactive. And so part of this story is David trying to take the reins of that mutant dream and be proactive in making sure that their species has longevity and has room to grow and thrive. And to do that before threats emerge, which of course wouldn't be as easy as it sounds. So I would say if you do want to just jump into this story, you probably can. Spurrier does a pretty good job of making it accessible to anyone. You don't need to know, every X-Men event or every obscure character that pops up in this book. because the focus is mostly on Legion, his own powers, his struggles, and his relationships. It is nice to have some context for the larger X-Men universe because, for example, he'll go up against them every once in a while in this book, and it is like the Bendis era X-Men with Cyclops, Magneto, and Magic as their own sort of radical team, and then also at the same time it's like Wolverine and the Jean Grey School is another set of teams that they go up against. But again, it's not like that's too confusing when things pop up, and I think, again, Spurrier does a pretty good job of letting you know the characterization of some of those tertiary characters immediately when they pop up. Like Chamber, for example, I thought was written very well in here when he showed up, and he sort of, had a bit of a spat with Legion. Super fun. Magneto's got some nice moments, Cyclops got some nice moments in here, Magic has some nice moments in here. And then there's some more obscure characters, like we hop over to the UK and we've got Pete Wisdom in there, who, again, I know him from Excalibur originally? Haven't seen much of him aside from that. But it didn't matter because context is given adequately and not in a super expositional, annoying way either. Now, when it comes to the artwork of this book, I will say it's a little bit hit or miss for me, but it's not because it's bad artwork, it's because it's super, super stylized. And I think that's mostly the Tan and Hewitt issues. I like the Jorge Molina issues, I think, a lot better, which sort of come more towards the tail end of the omnibus. And again, that's nothing to say anything bad about Tan and Hewitt. I do think he's really good at dynamic action, but I don't like the stylization of how he actually draws characters' faces and whatnot. But as far as like trippy, surrealist, gritty action, I think both the artists capture that really well, and that's always so exciting to see in books where we're doing big telepathic battles that are sort of happening in the mindscape or in the dreamscape or in whatever sort of abstract space you want to call it. And throughout the book, the colors really pop too. That absolutely is a phenomenal job there by, I think it's Jose Villarrubia, who just nails the mood of every single scene there, whether it's, a warm, hopeful glow that we need in a certain moment, or it's the dark, ominous tones of David's deep psyche. All of that's great. And again, I know I've said this a million times on this channel, so if you're not new here, say it with me. Comics are an interdisciplinary art form, so all of that art really does a lot to uplift the storytelling, and this is a case where the art's pretty good and the writing is phenomenal. So this is kind of a story that knocks it out of the park. It's definitely worth the read, and it is one of those stories that by the end of it, not a spoiler, but all the toys get put back in the box. So maybe no larger impact to the X-Men universe or to the Marvel universe, but a big impact to David's character, Legion, and a big impact to Blindfold's character, Ruth. And there's kind of two main antagonists to this story, and they both are a bit abstract in theory. The first is coming from Blindfold, actually, and that ties in with her backstory and her brother who hated mutants and sort of got absorbed into this religious group of bigotry against mutants and whatnot. Interesting stuff. And then the other big one, again, it's not really a simple villain. It is sort of this manifestation, physical manifestation of hate and rage and trauma and the darker parts of David's psyche, an abstract thing that protrudes from him and causes chaos in the world. And it really adds to David's own struggle for control in his life, and the more that he runs from his emotions, the stronger that this hate starts becoming, and it's just this vicious cycle of self-doubt and anger that he needs to beat before it consumes him completely. It's a really compelling story, guys. Like I said, really well done. Now, I do think that this story takes a little bit of time for us to really get interested in it, so if you read the first issue and you're not exactly feeling it, maybe go ahead and give it another issue or another 2 issues, because there's a lot going on here. It's deep, it's dense at times, it can be slow at times, but then, we sort of oscillate between that and the more fast-paced action. We just don't necessarily get that from the get-go in a super compelling way that is tied with the story. Obviously, it's a comic book, so you're going to get some action every single issue, but, I mean intentional action, or action that moves the story forward in a way that it feels like it's actually tied with the characterization, if that makes sense. But yeah, I would say this does what a lot of X-Men comics do really well. It almost feels like you're reading more psychological drama with superpowers than just sort of a bombastic action classic hero story. And I really like that. I think it's a rewarding aspect of the X-Men, and it's a really nice way to tell stories within the universe. So I would highly recommend this book for X-Men fans and just Marvel fans alike, and especially if you're interested in the son of Charles Xavier and seeing what he's up to and what he's like. Like I said, I don't really always like the voice of David Haller, and I think it's consistently written among comics pretty often. I just don't, he's not for me, exactly. But this story's good enough that I was sad. I was like, I need to turn the page, I need to keep reading, and I just blew through this omnibus. It was really, really great. Alright guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. If you've read this omnibus or this story before, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and with that, I will leave you all to have a great rest of your day.